time to get your fix. Come on down, get your horrible gaming review. 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 Wow.
Hello, my name is Zachariah with Old Man Gaming, and welcome to First Impressions video. If you're normal to the channel, you're expecting a horrible review in this spot. That's usually when we release it. However, I don't feel confident calling this an actual review because I've only played the trial version, obviously. But you know, I decided I definitely wanted to share my thoughts on it and give you guys an idea of what this game's all about. That being said, few disclaimers. Number one, I do snap judgment looks at these games. So basically, I'm going to give you an overview of what the game is. I'm going to tell you what the pros and the cons are of it so far in my point of view, as all reviews are. And then I'm going to tell you whether or not I'm going to be playing it after it releases. Now, what game are we talking about today? Well, we're talking about Monster Hunter Stories 2, The Wings of Ruin. A couple of extra disclaimers before I get into this that you, the people, should know. Number one, while I would consider Monster Hunter World one of my top 3 games, actually probably my favorite game of all time, I have not played any other Monster Hunter titles. Monster Hunter World is well, except for Rise. There is a video on this channel of Rise. It did not go over so well, but nonetheless, I did not care for it. I also never played Monster Hunter Stories 1. So with all that in mind, I'm taking a look at this game kind of with fresh eyes, ignorant eyes, so to speak. So what is Monster Hunter Stories? Well, Monster Hunter Stories exists in the Monster Hunter world, but basically the idea behind this is you are part of a civilization called Monster Hunter Riders who don't actually hunt, cull, kill, or capture the monsters. Instead, they've found a way to befriend and work in harmony with them. So your character does not go out and... I mean, he does go out and kill the bad ones, or ones that are rampaging or whatever, but he actually also brings them back and tames them, and he uses them for his own gains, which is really cool and different shift in idea in the Monster Hunter kind of ethos. To kind of follow this, the combat system isn't your standard third-person action game, like the previous entries. Instead, it's a turn-based strategy game. Kind of. This is very hard to explain because, honestly, I don't feel like there is another game like this. Yes, it's turn-based, but it's turn-based in such a unique way that it's going to be a little bit interesting for me to come up with words. Before I go down that path, though, the story is very simple. You are the grandson of some amazing hero who founded the village and actually trained a Rathalos to protect the village and all of that. He's long dead, and apparently he was the main character of the first game, so you don't actually have to play the first game to get into this. Nonetheless, his Rathalos has been protecting the village for some time, and something happens where that Rathalos gets vanished. I don't want to give you guys all the spoilers, but there is a conflict between traditional Monster Hunters from the games that you've played, the Monster Hunter World series, the Monster Hunter Generation series, that sort of thing, and the Monster Hunter Riders because of their obvious conflicting ideologies. You play a young teenage boy or girl, a creatable character from ground up, who is just becoming a fledgling rider, just finishing the training to become one. Being trained by another character named Kana, who serves as your first battle buddy, or your battle buddy through the entirety of the trial version. And then you go out to investigate strange happenings, as per se the usual Monster Hunter stuff. What's really, really interesting about this game is, in fact, the point of it is to grab eggs, bring them back, and hatch them on your own to train them for yourself. Now, the monsters seem to come out a little bit smaller than they originally do, when you're fighting them, or when or from Monster Hunter World. But when they do come out of the eggs trained, you can then level them up and fight with you. What's really interesting is when we get into the combat system, it is rock, paper, scissors at its very core, but it's like somebody took the foundation of rock, paper, scissors and built onto it a castle. There are so many mechanics added into this, and so many different variables and variations that go into the combat system, that makes it one of the most unique and in-depth. Simple to understand, incredibly complex to master, and that's one of the things that I love so much about this game. Expounding on that, because like I said, I don't want to give away all the story for the trial version, since it is the completeness of the trial version, but expounding on that, basically what happens is you can select a power, a technical, or a speed attack on any given round. Power beats technical, technical beats speed, speed beats power. Now, with that being said, your levels factor into it, the type of equipment you're using factors into it, and the type of attacks you're using factors into it. What's so interesting is so many ways that this can change, especially considering all the people who fight with you in your party, you have no control over. You can see what they're going to do, but you cannot actually control how they act, except for specific extreme situations, which makes things really interesting. You have to plan your attacks based on your enemies. You have to play based on your allies. You have to plan your actions based on your allies as well. If you've got one party member about to go down and nobody has selected a healing action, you have to select a healing action to heal them. If somebody's healing the down member, then you need to go for the attack to do more damage. It's a very interesting game, and it presents this interesting idea where the strategy of the game is coming to a symbiosis with the game itself, and I think that's just such a cool idea. This is further added to by double attacks when you attack the same enemy that another person is attacking with the same type of attack. You'll do a bigger, more volatile attack. In addition to that, you can also get these head-to-head battles where if you can see where the enemy is attacking and strike accordingly. You can do head-to-head to kind of take their attack out, or you can also try and attack somebody else if the person attacking you is a higher level and you know you're not going to do any damage. You then get into the fact that you can take one of your monsties, which is their kind of cutesy name for monsters that you've collected as your people with you. However, each turn you can switch between them once. So every turn, for free, you can just switch to a different monster, which is really interesting as well too. It sets up kind of interesting combos in the moment. To add into that, unlike previous Monster Hunter games, you don't go in with just one weapon. You actually go in with three. And then you get to switch between the three different weapons. And depending on how many times you have attacked your opponent, the monster will actually gain resistances to the weapon you're using. And much like your monstie, you can actually switch between the weapons once per round. So very interesting, because then you can start with the bow, which is good at applying status effects, but then when the monster get used to the bow or the status effect is applied, you can switch to some more damaging effects such as a hammer. There's also certain things that are easier to break. And then they've added this really cool system about actually taking parts about the opponent monster. You can target certain parts on the monster. Those parts are specifically hurt by certain things. If you're trying to hit a tail, you need to have a sword. If you're trying to hit a face, you need to have a hammer, so on and so forth. Very, very cool, intricate stuff. And this is just like scratching the surface of the strategy that goes into the combat. And unlike other games with this huge amount of strategy to it, you're only doing one action, so it's very snappy and quick. Everything is very quick and fast. You never get bored in those fights. It's very interesting. As far as the normal stuff goes, you will travel the world's different biomes, just like the Monster Hunter. You can track monsters, but what's interesting is depending on the monster that you have as your lead monster, you can ride that monster, and that monster will allow you to do certain special abilities. Like my Pookie could roar to scare off smaller monsters if I didn't want to fight them, whereas I had a Velocidrome that allowed me to jump to higher places or across big gaps. There's also monsters that swim that I hadn't collected yet. Probably monsters that fly. Just really cool stuff like that as far as the traversal. You do still collect materials, however, the materials aren't as obvious as to what they are. So, like, a mining node can give you any sort of mining, any sort of rock item from that area. A spider web can give you a spider web, but it could also give you different kind of insects huts and different stuff. There's one thing for a plant, so plants are just kind of like randomly what they are, which means that your in touchness with the actual environment, like Monster Hunter World, isn't really there, which is a real bummer, and that was one of my biggest complaints about Rise. However, this game makes up for that in a lot of different ways. We're going to get all that in the pros and cons, but I think I've kind of given you a good enough basic overview of what you do. You go out, you fight these monsters, you can also get the monster to retreat, and then you go back to their den and you try and steal an egg from them, take it back, hatch it, get a new monster. That's kind of the loop, with the added addition of like the armor and weapons and stuff like that. Something worth mentioning is while crafting for your equipment is huge in this game, just like other games, there is no tree like it was in Monster Hunter World. It's more like you get a certain number of items from a creature. Those number of items each has a point value, and when you want to build something from that creature, like the Kulu Yaku armor or the Puki Puki sword and shield, you need to have a certain number of points. It doesn't matter what items you got from the monster, it's just as long as your points add that up. So if I have 5 scales that all give me a +1, I need 4 of those scales to get the sword and shield, but I could maybe get like a quill that gives me a +3 for each one of them. So that's kind of how that works. Alright, so let's delve into the pros and cons. Pro number 1 with Bullet is the combat system. So good. I'm not going to go back into it since I just described it in the overview, but I can't say enough how great and interesting and in-depth it is. And it really brings a feel to this game. It was so interesting to see them incorporate all the basic monster hunting ideas in such a completely new and different way. It made me very excited. Pro number 2. So you collect these monsties, but you can have a party of up to 5 monsties. And those monsties you can switch back and forth between in battle, but you only actually have one monstie in battle at a time. What I'm getting at here is what's really cool about this is every one of those monsties in the party with you gains all the experience from every battle. So even though you have 5 monsties, you can very easily power level with this. And that is one thing about tactical strategy games that is always terrible. When you get newer characters and they're starting at level 1 or they're starting at lower levels, and you have to find some way to level them up by going back and fighting older bad guys until they get the level to where you want them to be. That does not exist in this game, because when you get those level 1 monsties, you can just stick them in the 5th slot, never use them for the first 3 or 4 battles or the first 3 or 4 quests, and they will be up at the level that need to be right away. It's just a non-issue in this, and that's what's so cool. That is so cool. I was so excited about that because all your monsters are hatched at level 1. And I got really worried. I'm like, man, I'm gonna get later and I'm not gonna care anymore. But with this in mind, all you have to do is just do a couple of quests or fights, and the monster you want will be up to the level that you want it to be at, and that's really cool. My next pro is the gameplay loop. So we're going to get into in cons that one thing it's missing from, like, say, the Monster Hunter World is that in touchness with the environment. That is something that I didn't like about Rise as well. While this does a couple of things a little bit better, a little bit closer to Monster Hunter World, there are some track hunting scenes, and there is an open world that you can explore and kind of get a little bit more in touch with. That's not really here. However, they put so many mechanics, so many interesting mechanics in this, that it's kind of like makes it so that it's not really what this game is about. The coolest thing is the monster den loop. Basically, the idea is you're getting the egg, bringing it back, hatching it. But how you do that is so interesting because there are these monster dens just like scattered around. They're like caves. When you enter the cave, you get this kind of like either randomly generate. I'm guessing randomly generated. It's either randomly generated or it's just a pre-selected. It's like randomly one of the things that they've already generated pops up map, but you quest through this little dungeon map to find the nest to get the egg. And once you do, that den disappears. Every so often, one will spawn that's gold. That's a rare monster den, which gives you a better egg. And it's just so interesting to like figure out what eggs are where and figure out what creature you're getting an egg from. Each one of these dens has a different kind of weird challenge to it. Like if the monster's just standing there ready for you, sometimes they're sleeping. You have to go in quiet. Other times they're not there, but if you search too much, you'll get ambushed. It's just a really cool gameplay loop. And it's something that kind of like compensates for other things that maybe is missing that you're not used to. And like I said, I just love the symbiotic combat and the symbiotic movement. One thing they really do is a good job of is make you feel in touch with your monsters. And because of that, like it really does feel like you're a rider. You feel their passion, you know. My final pro is a story beat, and while this story is definitely not for me, which we'll talk about in the cons overall, I love the idea that the people you normally play, the heroes of the story, the monster hunters, are kind of at least presented in the demo as a negative influence, as potentially the antagonist. I think that's such a cool twist 360 around. Again, I never played Monster Hunter Stories 1, so I'm not exactly sure whether that was what they did in the first one, but that's just such a cool idea in this one that I'd love to see it. So let's get into the cons. Con number one, and this is not going to be a con for everybody. Okay, it's definitely going to be a con for me, but not for everybody, is the dorky amount of silly anime hijinks that goes into this game. You immediately meet this, like, wisecracking cat that kind of sounds like Meow from Pokemon and never really shuts up, and there's just all this, like, anime silliness, and I understand that, you know, this is a Switch game, might be aimed at a slightly younger audience, and your character himself is younger than the other characters you play in. In Monster Hunter World, you're an older, more established hunter. You know, in this, he's a younger, much younger character. So I get that. But for me, it kind of misses on that. I think there's enough great game here to kind of forego that, but I found myself on a lot of cutscenes just being like, oh god, need to get through this. My next con is kind of a grandfathered in thing. The thing that I love about World is the connectivity to the environment around you that I don't think just about any other game does. You can really walk around those maps and feel like you're part of an ecosystem instead of just existing in the next scenery for the next fight, which is something I love from World that, again, I got a lot of hate for it, but I didn't feel that Rise did very well. This game doesn't really do it that well. It does a little bit better in my opinion, but it still doesn't really do that World thing. In my overall, though, there's so many cool new mechanics to this that, and I feel like this game really just isn't about that. It's about something else, and you kind of feel that in it. It's a much more cinematic experience, so I can kind of look past that. But since I've commented on it before with other Monster Hunter games, I feel like I need to mention it here. My only real technical con is this following con, and that is there is no way to quick switch between your Monsty party without going into a menu. It's super irritating because, like I said, you need a certain Monsty to be riding a certain Monsty to jump over a gap. You need a certain Monsty to dash. You need a certain Monsty to do this, to traverse certain things. And while I feel like I think there is a way to like quickly switch to them when you come to the obstacle that you don't have or whatever, I would much rather have a button that just allowed me to switch. I would love to just randomly like rotate through on the fly, especially if I'm about to go on a fight. I could just be like, oh, I want my Pookie Pookie up, so I just click like X a bunch of times, and when you're riding, there's a bunch of buttons that aren't used that could be used for this, and so I feel like that should be in the game instead of me having to actually click the menu button, go to a menu option, select a different monster, then click out. I would much rather have just a button that allows me to cycle through them as fast as I can cycle through them. So that's pretty much my only real technical issue here with this game. I do want to add one PS Pro to this. Not PS, like post-signature Pro to this that I forgot in the pros column, and that is how pretty this looks on the Switch. It is really pretty for a Switch game. Just really pretty. The battle animations are top-notch. My eyes popped. Even in handheld mode, I was just so amazed by the colors and everything that came at me. I also want to give an UG, which I've never given an UG before. Let me explain what an UG is. An UG is not a con because it's not going to affect the overall game experience going forward, but it's something that really irked me that I want to share with you guys. When you get to the end of the demo, the last chapter of the demo, and you finish that, it asks you to save. When you save, if you go back in and try and load your game, it says, "Thank you for playing. Please pre-purchase the game." Let me explain why this is irritating. First of all, it's really cool that all the progress in this demo carries over to the game when we purchase it. That's really awesome that a free demo does that. I love it when they do that. I think it should be an industry standard. What I don't like is I have all these side quests that I purposely didn't do till I was done so that I could work through them after I was done with the main part of the trial. So that I could do that leading up to the game. But now those are all locked behind the main game. So when you get there, it just kind of does this to you. And that's super irritating. I don't like that. It's an UG. Obviously, this is not going to affect the overall game when it comes out. It's just super annoying. Capcom, I love what you've done with this demo, but please let me do those side quests. Or at least tell us that this is going to end the demo, you won't be able to go back to what you were doing before, and then we won't do that last quest until we've done all those side quests, because there's nothing informing you of it. As far as whether or not I'm going to be buying this, that is a 100% hell yeah. I love it. I am as entranced with it as I was with World, even though that is for very, very different reasons. Very excited to play this game. I think there are very few bugs or problems with it. There are some minor quirky corniness that I don't enjoy, but I'm telling you, there's plenty of anime fans out there who are going to love that part of it. It's just not for me. I am very excited to play this, very excited to pre-purchase it when I have the cash, which will be soon. And yeah, I think we'll do a full review when that time comes. Hope you guys like this. I do want to say, before I finish off, no matter what you think of this video, it's just a video, guys. It's just an opinion of one guy in his basement talking about video games. So please keep that in mind. Just because of previous videos, I would love it if everybody just, was very mature about their opinions of this video. In any case, whether you liked it or hate it, please comment below. And of course, as long as you want to talk to us, we're on Facebook at OldManGamingDH, on Twitter at OldManGaming9. You can join our Discord, links in the description below. You can influence this and all of our shows from there. And guys, as long as you keep watching and listening, we'll keep making them. We'll see you guys next time.